we're lost, then we'll find a way. We don't know if we leave, will we make it home? We all know.
Hello. Welcome to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex and other chronic diseases and those affected. My name is Jill Woodworth, and I'm your host. Today we're on episode 23. My guest is Rebecca Thereault. Rebecca is a TSC mom, an advocate for her daughter affected by tuberous sclerosis complex, as well as a writer, blogger, and a sharer of her difficult and challenging journey with TSC in her daughter. Many roadblocks along the way in getting a clear diagnosis of infantile spasms as well as autism. Her perseverance through obstacle after obstacle and her continual ability to find joy in the moments and find hope, yet realistically honest about the impact on her entire family as well as her daughter, and how to hold some sort of balance in this journey. So, her words speak for herself, and I am going to post links, as I always do, on the Facebook TSC Talks page. Thanks so much for listening. And we did start a discussion on TAND towards the latter part of the podcast, and we will be having more information on this subject in the next upcoming podcasts. So, without further ado, thanks again, Rebecca, for coming on TSC Talks and sharing your hope and struggle. Take it away, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about how you got involved with TSC?
So
break it down to the beginning.
So I was 29 weeks pregnant. Kaylee is our first child, and I was having a routine ultrasound. We were happily watching her swim around on the screen, and it was taking a long time, but we were kind of like bonus because we got to watch her for a while longer on the screen, and we didn't really understand until the ultrasound tech said there's something wrong with her heart. There's also something wrong with her brain, and we need to call down a specialist right away, and you need to stay here and wait. Thankfully, we were already in a higher care hospital that has specialists, and they were able to just like call upstairs and get a maternal fetal medicine doctor down. So I was clearly very surprised and panicked right away. And they explained to us, the doctor came down, and it's a teaching hospital, UConn, and he brought down his student, and he brought down a book, and he mispronounced it right away and called it tubular sclerosis. Said that there was a 95% chance that she would have it because she had more than one growth on her heart. Also, with the fact that her ventricle size in her brain was slightly larger than expected. And to go home and not to Google it, it was a Friday in October that a geneticist would be calling us. And
did he tell you not to Google it?
Yeah, he told us not to Google it, that to wait to see the geneticist. And good thing he told us not to Google it. I mean, he mispronounced it, so we would have Googled the right thing. I basically didn't sleep, and
on a Friday.
Yeah, on a Friday, and it was my husband's best friend's wedding weekend, and we were scheduled to go away. So I stayed home, and he went to the wedding. So we saw the geneticist in short order the following week, and we were examined with a Woods lamp, and it was all the various signs and symptoms of TS were explained to us, we also were sent to a pediatric cardiologist for her to monitor Kaylee's heart. Kaylee was born at 35 weeks. She was delivered by emergency C-section because she was not moving around very well, and they were concerned about her heart. She came out pink and screaming and had good APGAR scores. They whisked her off to the NICU. And they clinically confirmed over the next few days her tuberous sclerosis. They took blood in the NICU and sent it off for testing. Thus started our journey. She came home 12 days later, and basically we were told just to enjoy her and treat her like a typical infant, which wasn't so easy. We went to see the geneticist, so we knew, and I didn't listen eventually and Googled it, and I did get to land on the Alliance page. So I knew of the risk of seizure. I knew of the risk of infantile spasm. I understood the risk of heart failure due to where her tumors were in her heart. And I knew the implications for her kidneys in the future. So I had read everything that I needed to. I did, at the time, there were clinics listed on the page in living in Connecticut. CCMC, the Connecticut Children's, was listed as a clinic. And the neurologist there did see Kaylee prior to her discharge from the NICU, and we decided, I had wanted to take her to Boston, but we decided that, seeing as Connecticut Children's was only 10 minutes from our house, that we would stick with there for care. So she was a small and wily little infant.
So you went home, you're home, and you know that that she has this diagnosis. And what was the next step as far as manifestations, or what was the next part?
So I,
after receiving that, loaded gun full of information,
I
to store away.
Definitely thought there were times where things were questionable. I would call neurology and say, she keeps kind of jumping in succession, it looks like, and we were told, it's just normal infant stuff. Then I would bring her, I noticed there was some issues with her, where she looked like she was, like, under her rib cage was, like, pulling in, like, kind of tugging when she was breathing, and I was worried about her in terms of her heart. I called in, the nurses talked to me, and they were like, oh, she's fine. And then I bring her in, and the pediatrician panics and sends us right to the emergency room. That was not normal, and they checked her heart out there, and it was fine. But then I had this nagging feeling something's wrong. She was about 4 months old, and I thought something's not right. She's not acting right. Something's going on with her. I had seen the pediatrician with her a bunch of times in the weeks going up to that, and at some point he said, I really think that something might be wrong with you. Like, maybe you have some postpartum depression going on. You should get things taken care of for yourself. Well, it turned out we took her to the, she started to show some signs that maybe we thought she had some neurological stuff going on too at the same time. But we took her to a routine cardiology appointment, and she was in heart failure. So,
oh my goodness.
So I definitely didn't.
Not really reassuring for the medical aspect in Beck, during that time. Wow.
yeah, so it wasn't just my overreacting. I knew something was going on with
Of
her,
course.
that her behavior wasn't as much as, her infant behavior wasn't her typical. So her heart function was incompatible with life, though she was living, and looked to everyone else's assessment completely fine. It just was a routine cardiology appointment. So she was,
Incompatible with life. Were the rhabdos interfering with the function of the heart?
they had regressed so quickly, they were basically not there anymore. And they regressed so quickly that they left her heart really flabby.
Okay.
And so it was kind of enlarged and flabby, and the mitral valve wasn't closing all the way.
So it lost its structure almost.
Yeah.
Huh.
So she was admitted to the PICU. It took them 2 hours to get an IV into her. Then she was started on a treatment called milrinone, and she was on that for a week, and her heart function improved, but her heart function was incompatible with life at the beginning of that time. And
Wow.
so it was at that time we were transferred from the PICU down to the regular floor, and she was transitioned onto oral heart medications. So
Wow.
I think she was sitting on my husband's lap, and she was facing out, and she started to crunch, do like the little abdominal crunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I know what that is. Pretty sure that's an infantile spasm. So I'm like, well, we have to get somebody in the room. So the APRN comes in the room, and she said, oh no, that's just reflux. I said, this girl, she has tuberous sclerosis. The chance of this being, we know she has reflux. She's on reflux medication. The chance of that being reflux is small. That's likely infantile spasm. So we had neurology come up. They said, let's just keep an eye on her. And so,
were they taking it seriously at that point?
They just kind of, I'm not exactly sure if they weren't taking it seriously, or it was because it was the first time, and it wasn't classic. She wasn't throwing her hands out, and she wasn't a classic jackknife.
Right.
It didn't look like the Moro reflex. It was just a slight crunch at the stomach, but that's often how they start smaller.
They start subtle.
Yeah.
Subtly.
And so we went home, and maybe a week later, she had her first simple partial seizure. She's just like sitting in her little bumbo seat, in her her right arm just started twitching. I was just completely aware, looking at me, but her right arm was twitching away. So they called neurology. It was, of course, everything happens on the weekend. So I call neurology. They say, well, we'll call in Keppra, but we'll just leave it at the pharmacy. You might not need it. I'm not quite sure what the neurologists are thinking with a child with tuberous sclerosis and a seizure starting, when they say we're just going to call in a medication, you probably won't need it. So
they didn't want you to go to the ER or anything.
No, I think because they knew she had TS and it was a seizure, they just said, here's a medication. But by the time she had her 10th simple partial that day, I took her to the emergency room. And so that started the journey with different medications.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the medication journey.
After that, she was, like maybe a week after that, she was on her playmat and had a classic jackknife movement, it appeared. And I